Hi, Hare Krishna. I'm Danai Shordas. So I mentioned yesterday in a post that I'd start writing more about the Great Reset here in our spiritual economics section of Facebook. And I thought I'd try something new. Instead of writing, I thought I'd see if I could speak this, looking into the camera, something I'm not used to, and see if that doesn't go quicker than writing. I tend to be a heavy editor, and so I guess I can't go back and edit these words that easily, so I'm going to try to do it all in one take. I hope it works, and please bear with me. And hopefully we'll get better with time. So, the Great Reset. I'm sure you've heard about it by now because at least for the last 2 weeks, maybe the last month, at least in the alternate news channels that I read, there's a lot of discussion about this. Actually, the Great Reset is something put out by the World Economic Forum back in June of this year. The chairman of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, he wrote a book connecting COVID-19 with the Great Reset. The book was COVID-19, The Great Reset. And in this book, which was obviously written before June, and obviously written before it was known that this pandemic was a plandemic and not very serious at all. I guess I expected it to be a very severe, deadly, and contagious disease. And so the book is written with the supposition that that is the case, and that COVID-19 has created such a great disruption in our lives that, gosh, we're going to have to redo everything. And when they say everything, they mean everything. So a lot of people are writing about this, and they write about it in vis-a-vis or in relationship to what's going on with COVID, the lockdowns, and so on like that. But of course, we're spiritual people, right? And I want to speak about it from the Vedic perspective, particularly, I'd say not really from a spiritual perspective, but from the Vedic worldview. And of course, you must realize, at least those who are Hare Krishna devotees, my friends here on Facebook, very much realize that the Vedic worldview is extremely different from the atheistic materialistic worldview, which is the program which is running most of the world, and the filter by which most of the people in the world understand what's going on. The Vedic worldview, which gives us information of the combination of matter and spirit, gives us a perspective that allows us to see everything from a very different perspective, and allows us to see things that people who are stymied or struggling with materialistic worldview really don't have any way to understand. So I'll just say a brief bit about the Vedic worldview, which is that this world is a combination of matter and spirit, that nobody dies, we're all eternal spiritual beings. But the most important aspect of the Vedic worldview, as far as this Great Reset is concerned, and spiritual economics in general, is, or rather, and material economics, is the fact that there are two types of beings in this world, as explained by Krishna in the 16th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the divine and the demoniac. The demoniac, Krishna came 5,000 years ago and took care of most of them. Most of them were killed in his pastimes and in the Battle of Kurukshetra, but not all of them. So subsequently, in the next 5,000 years or even less, they regrouped, they consolidated their numbers, and again, of course, they've taken control of the world, and it is those people, otherwise known as Rakshasas, who have been controlling this world for the last 4,000 years, maybe even more. And this accounts for a lot of the problems that we are having in the world. So we have to understand that. We must accept that. Sri Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita that these demonic beings, they engage in unbeneficial, horrible works meant to destroy the world. And we have a number of examples of Rakshasas in the pages in the Srimad Bhagavatam. There, the Rakshasas, they are what? We have Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha, the two quintessential examples of Rakshasas. They want to own everything and they want to control everyone. This is their mentality. And unless we understand that mentality and accept it, it's hard to understand what exactly they're doing. And that's going to play an important part in understanding exactly what's going on with this great reset, with the vaccinations, COVID-19, and everything. So keep that in mind. In my spiritual economics book, I did a chapter on the divine and demonic consciousness to explain why we have so many terrible things going on in the name of economics, or rather, how we have economics, let's say, how they have arranged economics as the tool by which they control the world. And so I want to read a little bit, or let's say, I'll go back. I won't read very much. I'll go back and look at some of that chapter. If you have the book, you might want to review that because it gives a lot of insight into how these people think. So there's a number of psychologists who have studied the evil people of the world, one of which was the psychologist Erich Fromm. He was a student of Freud's, and he was prompted to study the nature of evil given what he was seeing take place in the Third Reich. So from his study, he came up with what he calls malignant forms of evil. Malignant meaning decay. It cannot be healed. And he says these malignant and gravest forms converge to create the syndrome of decay. This represents the quintessence of evil, and is at the same time the most severe pathology and the root of the most vicious destructiveness and inhumanity. And certainly, if you study what's going on in the world, it's not hard to come to that conclusion. He describes several forms of this. One of which is necrophilia. Necrophilia here, in this case, not meaning the desire to have sex with dead, but necrophilia meaning the love of all that is dead. And this is the nature of evil people. And it's actually not difficult to understand that this is the basic state of the world today. Of course, these demonic people have created the world that we live, and they have more or less foisted on people, all of us, a materialistic orientation to life. To say that we love all things that are dead is not different than saying we live in a materialistic society, because material energy is dead. And so that's one characteristic of these people. They have no problem with death. They have no problem with killing people. In fact, they have a problem with life, and they prefer things that are dead. They would rather see people behave as if they were dead or as if they were automatons in a way that they can control them. And again, this will come up again and again in our discussion of the Great Reset. Another person that studied the evil people was Scott Peck. Scott Peck, if you maybe read, if you were around in the 90s, you read his books. He was very popular. At that time, he wrote a book called People of the Lie, The Hope for Healing Human Evil. So he was a clinical psychologist, and he, in his clinical practice, he found that many of the problems that people were experiencing in life were due to these people who were just downright evil. And because he was a Christian, a believer, and he thought, well, I'm going to study this psychology from a psycho-spiritual perspective. And that's what he did. And so he came up with this understanding that there are, in fact, evil people in the world. He said that evil people are narcissistic, they lack empathy, they're extremely greedy, they're bald-faced liars. They respect only raw power and do not respond to kindness or gentle persuasion. They create confusion, frustration, angst, futility in their dealings with others. And while often subtle, their destructiveness is remarkably consistent. They seek to avoid incrimination, steadfastly refusing to acknowledge their own wrongdoing, and instead engage in scapegoating and projecting their misdeeds onto others. And this is, let's say, when I wrote this chapter, or let's say prior to writing this chapter, I read 5 or 6 books about psychopaths. And this description is very consistent with every one of them. So I take it to be that psychopath is a modern psychological term for the word, for the Rakshasas. Or let's put it another way, that Rakshasas are described in modern psychological terms as psychopaths. Important to understand, as they've studied psychopaths, this is not a psychological problem that they have. It's not that they have some psychosis or they have some mental disease. It simply is the way they are. Now, one important feature of psychopaths is that they have no conscience. That is, they have no understanding of right and wrong, or let's put it another way, their understanding of right is anything that they want to do, and wrong is anybody who opposes them. And if you see something wrong in their dealings because they cannot be wrong, you must be the locus of that evil. So they project their evil onto you because you've identified it in them. Does that make sense? We see a lot of this in the political arena today. And if you understand this, you can understand that there are many psychopaths in political power. And that fact was actually brought up by another author, a Polish writer, who during the Soviet times studied was motivated to study the nature of evil and malignant narcissism. And what was his book? His book was Political Ponerology, a science on the nature of evil adjusted for political purposes. And he very straightforwardly makes a point that the psychopaths, they're attracted to positions of power, both in government and in corporations. And that's, to a large degree, who we have running the world, is these soulless, at least people without conscience, who are simply in it for their own aggrandizement, their own profit, and they have no problem at profiting or getting ahead at the expense of others. In fact, they even think that they're foolish not to do so. If they can exploit somebody or take advantage of somebody or use somebody to further their own ends, they think of themselves as fools if they do not do that. So that's some background, the demonic nature, and understanding that these people have been controlling this world for millennia. In my spiritual economics book, I explain that they have created the way that we live. They have created the economic system, the political system, the health, or let's say disease care system that we have today. And so they've given us the world that we live in. And they've set it up in such a way so that they can exploit us without people even having the slightest understanding of the fact. For example, when we use money, we automatically make ourselves poorer and make them richer. It is no accident that there is huge disparity in this world, that we have, a handful of billionaires who own, or let's say whose net worth is the same as the poorest 50% of the people of this world. That's the way they've set it up. It's working perfectly the way it should be. Their opinion is that they own this world and they own everything in it. Now, if you go back to Srimad Bhagavatam and read a little bit about Hiranyaksha, Hiranyakashipu, this is exactly the mindset of the demonic. They want to be God. They want to own everything and even everyone. They want to control everyone, even to the point where, if you recall, Hiranyakashipu, when he was asking for benedictions from Lord Brahma, he said, I want to reverse the results of pious and impious activities. In other words, no good deed goes unpunished, and those who perform bad deeds, they get rewarded. Sound familiar? A lot of people see that in the world. Not difficult to see at all. And then they wonder, why is the world working like this? You know, why did God set up the world like this? Well, God didn't set up the world like that. These demonic beings who have been controlling the world, they've set it up like that so that they can exploit everyone and own everyone without our even knowing about it. So that's the background information. Now, how much time do we have? I don't want to make this too long. Then we're going to get into the Great Reset a little bit. Again, this is put out by the World Economic Forum. And if you go to their website, wef.org, I believe, and you look there, they've got a lot of videos. Of course, they have a lot of money. They've got a lot of people working on this, and they're making it sound like, well, we've got to change everything in the way the world is working because COVID has created such a disturbance in our world. Not. COVID didn't do anything. It was a political response to what was thought to be a very contagious, deadly disease that created problems. But COVID by itself, did it do anything? No. People always die, right? The death rate is 100%. So the fact that perhaps COVID caused a few elderly people to die quicker, unfortunate, but everybody's going to die. For the rest of the population, chances of survival are 99.5% or more for those younger than 60. So where's the danger here? It's not that the world has to change because of COVID-19. When we see statements being made like this that have no substantial evidence behind them, we can understand that there is an ulterior motive, that there's a hidden objective that they are trying to accomplish. And so they make a lot of propaganda to try to convince people that there are problems when there in fact are not problems. So that's what's going on. In the next video, I'm going to give you show some shots from their website, and we'll look at this a little deeper and see what they have in mind. I think that's enough for now. That's an introduction to what's going on with a relevant background from the Vedic worldview. Thank you for joining me for today. I hope I did pretty well with speaking to the camera. I'm not used to this at all, and I hope to get better as we go. Okay, maybe I'll get a video out every 2 or 3 days. That's what I'm going to try. So if you hit the like button, I think you get a notice when the next one comes. So hit the like button, and then we'll see you in a few days.